So I'm going to acknowledge in this particular video that this particular book tag video is going up a little bit late. I filmed the 26 minutes of it. Everything looked like it was fine. Went to edit the video and make sure everything was okay, and none of the audio recorded. So we're back to square one. Thankfully, I still have my notes and things like that, so we can just go ahead and get rolling with this respective video, and I can give you my thoughts on this respective book tag. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as TA Summers. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. So today's video is another book tag video, and it's been a little bit since I've done a book tag video, and I always find these very fun to do. So any that you see, please feel free to send my way, and I definitely thank Frodo for tagging me in this respective tag, which I had never heard of, so I definitely thank him for that. This is the Devouring Books tag, and this was created by a smaller booktube creator named Del Devours. So I'm going to jump into these 11 questions. Some of them I may have touched based on in other book tag videos, but I think it's cool to be able to see if or my answers have changed, or if I have different preferences from where I had them before, even if it was weeks, months, or even years in terms of things. So without further ado, we're just going to jump into it for right now. So question number 1, do I remove the dust covers while reading, or do I leave them on? So it depends on the book. I usually will alternate between removing the dust jackets to make it easier for me to read, so I don't mess up the dust jackets for books that I want to read through. Other times I will leave them on. It just really depends on my mood. I never discard my dust covers at all. I like to keep them on my books. The only time that I would discard a dust cover if it is in such bad condition, and usually it's kind of dependent on when I get used books and things like that, because sometimes normal book wear and tear happens, but very rarely do I discard any dust covers of my books. I usually try to keep them on and keep them in my collection. Question number 2, do I use bookmarks or whatever I have on hand, or do you do I dog ear my books? I never dog ear my books, so that is definitely out of the question in terms of things. I know Frodo had answered in terms of saying like the third option is not one, so that made me laugh. But usually, like, depending on where I am in terms of things, I always try to, when I have a physical book, bring a bookmark with me. If that is not an option, a slip of paper or a receipt or something like that will suffice very fine. If I have a hardcover that I'm bringing with me and I don't have a bookmark with me, sometimes I'll use the corner of one of the dust jackets. If it's one that isn't laminated, I'll kind of fold it into and use that to hold my place as kind of a placeholder bookmark. I don't know if very many people do that. Actually, I can't show you any examples here because I don't have any hardcovers to be able to show you. Well, let me see. Some Desperate Glory. This is a special edition by Emily Tesh that I got from Illumicrate. This is a hardcover copy. So if you can see what I can do here, like usually if I want to mark my place, hopefully I don't mess this up too much because it's so pretty, I will kind of fold it back like this and use the dust cover as a placeholder bookmark if I don't have one for a hardcover. So that will tell you how I improvise in terms of things. And let me put this back together because I don't want to mess it up. But it's really cool, like, and this is a really cool copy, so I'm definitely looking forward to reading this at some point. But that is kind of an example of what I do when I have a hardcover and a dust cover of a book. If I don't have a bookmark, I will take the corner of one of the edges of the dust jacket and I kind of fold it into the last place that I was reading, if it works all right. But yeah. Question number 3, do I prefer physical, audio, or ebooks? So I would say that I Most of the time prefer physical books to read because I like the feeling of having a book in my hands to be able to sit down and read and really taking the experience for what it is in terms of things. And you can say that like I kind of rank it this way, like in terms of between physical, audio, and ebooks. My first preference is physical. My second preference is audio because I like to listen to audiobooks on the go, and I love the experience of being able to listen to an audio narrator narrate the book and have different voices for the characters, and also just be able to relax and not have to have any kind of eye strain or anything like that. Just close my eyes and listen to and be immersed in the respective story that I'm listening to. And then the final one is ebooks. If I cannot find a physical copy of a book, or if I prefer to have an e-copy that isn't audio, I will pick up the ebook for reference. Carry my Kindle Paperwhite with me, like on the go, to be able to read things too, if as an option. If I don't have a physical book with me, or the mobile app that I have on my phone, I will read ebooks from as well. So it just depends. I love them all, but if I were to state my preference, physical first, audio second, ebook third. Question number 4, do I prefer hardcover or softcover books? That's a great question, and I believe I've answered this before, but I prefer either soft cover or what's known as paperback in terms of things, because of the storage piece of it not being too heavy to read when I'm physically reading in my hands, and being able to bend and do what I need to, like with respect to the paperback copy. Whereas hardcover books, I do tend to, if there's no other option in terms of a book, I will pick up a hardcover. Or if I want to have a special collector's edition of a book, I want to keep my collection, I will get hardcovers as well. But it just depends on the book. But I tend to gravitate towards paperback or softcover books. Question number 5, do you have a favorite time of day to read? I will read at any point of the day, whether it's in the morning, whether it's on a commute, whether it's at lunch, whether it's at night, but my preference is usually at night, probably about a couple of hours before I go to sleep, as my designated reading time, because that is what helps me relax the most. That's when I'm relaxed the most and I can get immersed into a story during that time frame at night when I'm starting to wind down for the day. So I try to keep that as a consistent routine in terms of my reading schedule and reading time. So question number 6, do I annotate my books? I do not do this as much as I would like to do, but I admire a lot of the people that I see doing annotations for books, whether it's having a color coded system or a specific sticky note system in terms of making notes with their books. I do have a couple of special edition copies of books that I've gotten in book boxes and collector's boxes where authors have signed and annotated their own books, which I think is a really cool thing to be able to see how the author reacts to certain pieces in their story, or what pieces went into the creation of a story. That's really cool. And also being able to see how readers annotate their books in terms of things things that they pick up on or care about or enjoy in terms of the making of different notes as they annotate. So it's something that I'd like to do more of, but I don't currently do it, but I definitely would like to do it more. Question number 7, what are some book-related stereotypes I grew up believing but don't anymore? So the first one that came to mind when I saw this question was the whole book to movie adaptations are typically bad. And that was one that was started early on with me, with certain perspectives that I trusted in terms of reacting to certain movies and books and pieces of media. But I'm glad I don't have that particular mentality anymore, because I think it's really just a case-by-case basis. There are some books that are actually better than the movie. There are some movies that are actually better than the book. It just depends on what media you consume. And question number 8. Does my gender identity or associated stereotypes affect my reading choices? I would honestly say no to this, because very early on when I started my reading journey, the purpose of how I got into reading was to be able to read from perspectives that were different from my own and be immersed in perspectives that are different from my own. I always appreciate being able to read on people who have identities and experiences and perspectives that are like mine, but I also actively try to seek out books and different pieces of media with to be able to explore different viewpoints and different ideas and different experiences of the world through different people's eyes. So I love that exploratory type of feeling that I get when I dive into fiction or even nonfiction. So it really just, like, I don't think it's really made like that much of a difference in terms of things. I keep an open mind and I try to go into each book or experience to be able to take different ideas and different perspectives from it as I can read it, and being able to learn more about things. Even if it's not necessarily an educational aspect in terms of, like, for the purposes of education, I try to look at it in terms of how it illuminates and how I may not have thought of something in the same way in terms of the viewpoint that I'm seeing through. I'm like, oh, I learned something different from this. So this is really cool. And this is really cool to be able to take from this other person's experience or other viewpoint experience. So that's the way that I think about it. Question number 9, and this kind of takes a little bit from my previous answer to one of the other questions. Do I watch film adaptations of books, and do I watch them before or after I read the book? That's a great question. I do watch film adaptations. I always try to read them, if preferentially before I watch the movie. But sometimes that hasn't always worked out in my favor in terms of things. Sometimes I've read the book. I've read books in light of like movie adaptations that I wasn't allowed to see when I was younger. One example is The Good Son, and I think I may have talked about this on the channel before. But The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin as well as Elijah Wood was a film I didn't see until much later, but I read the book novelization of the movie first before I watched the movie, because my parents would not let me watch it, and I understood why afterwards. But I'm glad I was able to read the movie novelization, because it did do a good job of summarizing the movie events and showcasing certain scenes, and also expanding upon them with scenes that were not actually in the movie. But it was a good experience, and I actually enjoyed it, and it's one of my favorite stories in terms of the suspense and thriller aspects of it. It was a really cool movie, and I definitely, even to this day, it still has an impact on me. So question number 10. Do I engage with fan labor? Have I ever sought out the source material afterwards? So this is a good question. I think from what Frodo had said, that fan labor is essentially the same thing as fan fiction. And to answer this question, I absolutely do engage with fan fiction. I have read fan fiction. I also have written fan fiction, and I still write fan fiction to this day, even though I keep usually that writing handle private in terms of things. But the range of stories that I have written in terms of fan fiction have been many. I started writing fan fiction even before I knew I was writing fan fiction, to be able to tell you, because the way that I approach fan fiction is a little bit differently than others in terms of things, because the way that I thought about it initially when I was younger was taking these prompts and trying to envision myself as a TV writer or a movie writer, and trying to write episodes of a piece of media that I really loved in terms of things. And I started writing fan fiction very, very young, like in terms of things like some of the fandoms that I have written in more recently, kind of like as I've been older, have been included Doctor Who, Mass Effect, Star Trek, NCIS was another one, several different games. several different like tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons, the Cyberpunk series, which if you know about the Cyberpunk series, if you know about the game Cyberpunk 2077, like that was actually based on a tabletop game that preceded it, that was many years ago. I'll put the cover up for here, but I've written fan fiction from that particular source material. I have even written several fanfics that were based on animated series that I grew up with, including Disney and non-Disney properties, which is why I'm keeping mum, because I know how the mouse is. So yeah, I've written in those perspectives. I've written in fiction and anime series that I have watched. A lot of the Toonami TV series like Gundam, Tenchi Muyo. Let's see. Surprisingly, not as many Sailor Moon fanfics as you would think in terms of things, even though I'm a big Sailor Moon fan. But the interesting thing is, in terms of how young I started with respect to writing fanfiction, I remember writing fanfics. The two properties that I first wrote fanfic on, and I still have both of those stories, at least in part. I think the disc that was that had these stories on them was corrupted, so I was able to save one and part of the other. But to tell you, the very first fanfics that I wrote in when I was probably between the ages of 8 and 10 was based on an old one of them was based on an old computer game that some may recognize when I say it, or it may be so much older that some people are looking at it's like, you played that game? It was one of the first games that I was able to beat on my Packard Bell computer way back in the day, and it was called Mega Race.
WBT is proud to present the show that squashes reality like a bug. That's right, you better be ready to Mega Race. And here's your mega host, Lance Boyle.
Hey, welcome to Mega Race, the action show where violence only happens once every few seconds. Hi, I'm Lance Boyle, and people often wonder if I'm real.
And the way that I approached writing in that particular universe was as the perspective of one of the drivers who was trying to survive the death games, in terms of going through the races, outfitting the car, interacting with Lance Boyle, who is the host, who is funny and quippy and everything else in terms of things. I wrote a story centered in a couple of stories and centered in that universe. I wrote even a brief story based on the computer game Myst, if anyone remembers that as well. I think a lot of people do, but in terms of the original game as it was, I wrote fanfic for that. And then I also wrote a fanfic on an animated series that I have no shame in terms of saying that I did write a complete story for this. I was obsessed with the movie Rainbow Bright and the Star Stealer when I was a kid, and I wrote a couple of stories based in that universe and based off of the Rainbow Bright series of the 80s fame. I know it's been remade maybe a couple of times in terms of things, but the original 80s property for Rainbow Bright, I wrote fanfic for that when I was younger. One of these days, for a video idea, I may go back and read some of the first fanfics that I have ever written in terms of things. Hopefully I won't be too shamed by my 10-year-old self in terms of things, but at least it'll tell you where I got started in terms of my writing journeys and why I became a writer and some of the things that I incorporate in the stories that I tell. But we'll see what happens if I feel that brave. And the last question for the Devouring Books tag is, has watching BookTube or being a booktuber affected my reading preferences? So I'm a relatively new booktuber, but I am not new to booktube. I have been watching booktube for very many years at this point, and I've been a YouTuber in different perspectives. The original reason why I joined YouTube way back in the day was on another channel, my Rosebell's 1984 channel, where I was doing liquid story binder tutorials in my spare time while I was going to school. But I got into booktube in terms of seeing some of the creators that I really admired talking about the books that they have. And one of the inspirations in terms of that was me being able to talk about books that I didn't see a lot of other people talking about in terms of things. So I would say to this particular question, yes and no would probably be it, because I am influenced by other booktubers in terms of the books that they pick up that I haven't heard about and that are new to me, while also at the same time I would say that being the kind of reader that I am, and if I don't see other booktubers talking about a specific book or specific genre or things like that, I will kind of come to the forefront and say, hey, this is something that I love and that I have picked up in terms of things, and I want to share that with you. Or if it's a book that I have read and I didn't like as much, I'll share that with you as well. So I would say to that question, it would be both yes and no. It just depends on things. And I do appreciate the fact that I've been able to be a part of the booktube community and have been welcomed as much as I have. And I definitely look forward to making more videos about the things that I read, the media that I consume, and being able to share my thoughts with you all. So that is the Devouring Books tag. And I really enjoyed this. This was a really cool tag. So thank you again to Del Devours for making this respective book tag, and thank you to Frodo for tagging me. I always appreciate these, and I definitely look forward to doing more book tags in the future. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be informed of when I post new videos. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next video.